Hello, this is Herman Ostwick, and welcome to the webcast about image sharing. And we have a very distinguished panel with us today, and the first one is Jim Phillips. Hi, Jim. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Jim, tell me what's your title?
Vice President of Enterprise Operations at LifeImage.
Great. Second, we have Joe Marion. Joe, tell you what's your title and what do you do?
I'm Principal of Healthcare Integration Strategies, and I'm a healthcare industry consultant.
Great. Thank you, Joe. And next one, Mitchell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Herman. This is Mitchell Goldberg. I am the Global Product Manager for the Dell Cloud Clinical Archive.
Great. Well, let's go talk a little bit about image sharing. And as you probably know, image sharing today is a pretty big issue. We want to share images, and it's not always as convenient and easy. A lot of people struggle with CDs, but CDs is kind of old, school. We really want to make sure that we can smoothly and transition to a time where we can share these images and have them available anywhere, anytime. And let me ask you the first question. The first question is for Joe. Joe, let's say you get a client, and as a consultant, what would you recommend to your client as the best image sharing scenario? Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, Herman. I think it's going to depend on circumstances, but clearly the future is in CD-less or media-less transfer, taking advantage of internet transmission and cloud-based access.
And do you see it really implemented widely already, Joe? I haven't seen it that much. I think still a lot of people are running around with CDs, correct? What do you think?
I think the majority are probably still CDs, but I think that many of the academic centers or large teaching hospital environments are taking advantage of it. Clearly, LifeImage has a number of installations, particularly I'm familiar with in the Boston area. So I think it's beginning to catch on.
Okay, now thank you, Joe. So let's now go to LifeImage. Jim, what is the main reason for using your? First of all, let me back up. Maybe can you explain a little bit how LifeImage works, and what would be the main reason that your customers want to use your particular solution?
Sure. Thanks, Herman. And Joe is absolutely right. The large academic medical centers have really caught on to image sharing first, and that's mainly because they have a specialist that work on staff there where patients are being referred into. So they're often getting imaging work done somewhere else first, and then get referred into what we call an image intensivist, so some specialist, whether it be a neurologist, orthopedist, a surgeon, and they bring the outside imaging in, as you said today, typically on CD. And we want to try to avoid having the patient be responsible ultimately for that transfer from the outside imaging institution to the specialist. So now we can enable, cloud-based transfer, and that's what LifeImage really does: is utilizes the cloud in a secure way to transfer the images from wherever they were acquired to the specialist.
Do you provide a repository? That means that you actually archive the images and make them available for a certain time, or do you do mainly store and forward, or do you do both?
We do similar to both, but it basically is a store and forward. We like to think of ourselves as the plumbing for the imaging to transfer through. Though we do hold it for some period of time in the cloud, depending on the use case.
Okay. Now, Mitchell, I was a question for you. I was following a little bit what's going on in the UK, and there's a lot of deployment of new PAC systems, and people are wrestling there with image sharing as well. And it seems that there's a lot of XDSI implementations, but I don't see a lot of people using it. Can you comment a little bit on that? What do you think is the reason, potentially?
Sure, Herman. So, in an interesting way, Life doesn't archive the images, and we are the archive from which we share, right? So, sure. Given that we are retaining them for a longer period of time, that has a lot more meaning to XDSI when you need to register the location, because you don't know where they'll be viewed. It's not a point-to-point, it's a network of information. and I think that's why you see it more in the European. I think your observation is right. There's a lot more adoption of XDS-based image exchange in the EMEA region, even in Canada, than there is in the U.S. Today, it's largely point-to-point, and from the adoption of XDSI, I think there's a mild adoption of it. In North America, I know it's a requirement in most of the RFPs that we receive today.
And just let me explain a little bit for people that don't maybe necessarily know what XDSI is. So XDSI is the exchange document. Actually, was initially created for exchanging document, expanded to imaging, and basically it requires an intermediary that basically communicates with the health information exchange, either private or public, that then serves as a broker and then takes care of the information exchange. It's a little bit different than Mitch says about the point-to-point. Point-to-point can actually just, one hospital says, I want to exchange information with my referrals of my academic institution, and we need to do a point-to-point transfer.
Right. Although, Herman, as you know, XDSI is different than XDS.B in that normally when documents are registered in the registry and repositories, the actual documents, the CDAs, are put into that repository. What XDSI does is it is the same protocol as XDS.B, except that it passes the pointer to where the data is archived, right? So therefore, any XDS consumer goes to the same registry repository, finds the document after doing a patient query, but then goes to the image-specific archive that adheres to the XDSI profile, and the images are served up from that specific archive.
Yeah. Now, with regard to image sharing, one of the, I think, the number one concerns I always hear is potentially jeopardizing the patient privacy. So I like the opinion for all of you. Maybe let's first start with Joe. Do you think it's a valid concern, first of all, and what can we do maybe to try to alleviate it, to make this information sharing a little bit more popular, because it's by far not as popular as it should be right now? So Joe, go ahead.
I think it's a valid concern, Herman. There are situations where I blogged on this once that it's not just the image data that's at risk, it's also the database of studies. So even if I encrypted the images, but I didn't encrypt the database, there's still the potential that someone could hack in and see that a certain patient has had image material in that archive. So I think it's important to, if one is going to do any level of encryption, to do both the database and the image content as well.
Okay. What about you, Jim? What do you think? What's your comment about this security issue? How does live image address this?
Sure. So it's obviously a big concern, and whenever you deal with any type of PHI, you have to treat it securely, and people won't use the technology if it's not secure. But what we have found is that it's often the need for image sharing today just via physical CD, where there is really no level of security beyond, unless you hold on to the CD yourself, the ability to have reporting on it and to actually control it and actually see it move from end to end and see it share across the network and see who's viewing it and have that audit capability is very important, as well as Joe was saying, to encrypt the data in transit and at rest. Obviously, we do all of those things.
Great. What about you, Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to echo that security is obviously of paramount importance, but I think there are steps to in the audit logging, so to understand who's viewing it and permissioning through the IHE profiles, right? The basic patient privacy consent engines. So there's the threat of someone hacking in, but then there's also the risk of not knowing who's viewing your data. And I think LifeImage and Dell take strict precautions to be able to provide auditing as to how the information is accessed. And between the two of us, we clearly have a lion's share of the market that's doing exchange. LifeImage being in a lot of the academic medical centers, and the proportion of exchanges Jim pointed out is taking from the smaller hospitals and imaging centers that we archive for and sharing that information to the academic medical centers for the imaging intensivists. So that's why Life Image and Dell have partnered to bring this a connected solution to the market.
Now, we're going to get this Accountable Care Act being put in place very, very soon, or if not already done in the United States. And so the bottom line is that we really want to get access to many, many more consumers or many more patients to healthcare. And I think like image sharing will be a major contribution, could provide a big contribution to lower the cost of healthcare, because having the information available at any place, any time. Joe, what do you think? What do you think is going to be happening? Will there be a push from the government, you think, or from federal government to really have that happen more? Do you think that might help? What do you think, Joe?
I can't wait for it to happen, Herman.
I know.
I had a personal experience this summer with that, or early spring, where we were vacationing in Florida, and I had an episode of vertigo, ended up in the hospital, and they said, "Oh, you need an MRI," and I said, "No, I don't." And if I could have had access to my images from prior exams, I could have demonstrated to them that no, I really did not need to have another follow-on, very expensive exam if anyone's ever had health care in Florida. So definitely, I think that informed consumers would appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide access to that. I think one of the major factors to that is in the context of who has rights to or control of that information. So I, as a informed consumer or patient, would prefer that I control who has access to that, as opposed to maybe facility to facility.
Yeah, but you bring up an interesting point, Joe. I mean, in the question of what's going to be driving the sharing of information, is it the patient or is it the reimbursement model around accountable care? And I think my position is that radiology practices are being incented to participate in accountable care models, and therefore they need to enable their practices for the sharing of information so that the collective can have access and meet the cost objectives for the episode of care, which is only the single payment they'll be getting reimbursed. Does that make sense to you, Jim?
I was just going to say absolutely. I mean, we're seeing it today, even ahead of the full Accountable Care Act going into place, where ACOs on a regional level are driving out costs by trying to remove duplicate imaging across their ACO systems. So the need for image sharing becomes pretty evident, just to avoid sort of the low-hanging fruit of duplicate studies that are unnecessary, and then even to tackle the higher-hanging fruit, if you will, of exams that may not be necessary based on prior exams that are done, if you could see that across the whole network.
So if you would have asked me 3 years back where we would have been today with image sharing, I would have said at that time, 3 years back, that we would have been much farther than we are today. What do you think the main obstacles, Jim?
It's funny, we started shipping product probably about 4 years ago, and we had a very successful ad campaign centered around what we called Skater Boy, where it was a skateboarder got in an accident and wiped out, and it referred to the slogan that he could actually upload his pictures of his wipeout to Facebook a lot easier than he could get his x-rays to his surgeon. There's got to be a better way, and still that same sort of logic applies today. The technology is out there. Obviously, we can make it secure and efficient, but the adoption has been slower than we would like, obviously, as a company, but even across the industry to help care. And I think just because it's somewhat new, and cloud as a whole really started to take hold, I think, about 3 years ago in healthcare, why it was greater in other industries. So I think it's just the technology is evolving. Now we see a much higher ramp up and a lot of people wanting to participate a lot more, and I think driven from some of those cost reduction arguments that we just spoke to.
Joe, what is you taking up? What do you think? Why is it Did your physician there know about image sharing? Did they know about the capabilities that were possible, and why couldn't we make it work, so to speak?
Well, I think if the technology had been there, it would have worked. So
Yeah.
if I had access to my images and could have, given them the website, or if you will, or the link to view those, then it would have worked. So I think it's it's not a question of technology. I think the other aspect is whether it needs to be diagnostic or non-diagnostic. So part of the hang-up with stage 2 was always in the context of it's too expensive, we need DICOM viewers, we need all this technology to be able to do it. I'm not sure that that's the case, is that in the context of maybe just sending simple image viewing, JPEGs or whatever, that wouldn't suffice for those types of situations. I mean, you can always follow up with the higher resolution information if it's necessary, but for a simple consult or access, it may not be necessary.
Don't forget, radiology today is what I have heard called swivel chair radiology, right? If you look at many of these reading rooms that Joe and Jim and I visit, they're already looking at one PACS console for the hospital and one PACS console for their imaging center, and to introduce a third tool that isn't integrated, especially if you're trying to look at the old exam in comparison to the new, just became a workflow issue. I think one of the things that has changed in the last 3 years is not only cloud adoption, but the ability to integrate and automate the image importation and institutionalizing of the data so that it can be viewed as live image allows you to put the information that they've been exchanged into the PAC system for diagnostic viewing. So it's a matter of cloud adoption, the production environment not ready for another user interface of another application, and the need to integrate the workflow so that it's not just someplace else you have to go to view the data.
Now, here's a question again for Jim. Imagine everybody would have had a health information exchange by now. Would you then still need clouds?
It's interesting to see the development of the health information exchanges start to tackle imaging today, and we see more of that start to come up. But health information exchanges are often very localized. You could think of Life Image as really connecting a network of networks across the country, because patients, people no longer stay in one region, and HIEs are often limited to one region or one geography, and as patients travel in and out of there or seek care outside of their local area for some specialty, or if they're shopping for care across the country, even to go to a specialist somewhere else, the need for image exchange really it will always, I think, be there to connect these networks. So Life Image could be the national exchange across all the local networks. I still see a need for that, obviously. And then even locally, imaging centers across the board you're never going to have full participation in every image acquisition area to actually participate in an HIE. I think one day that we'll slowly approach that, but much like CDs today, we'd love to see CDs go away, and yet they're out there pretty.
I know. Yeah, like I just got a call not too long ago of a person that said, well, my son has a serious condition, and every time he goes to a specialist, he needs to carry 27 CDs with him. How do I solve that? And I said, well, there's this information exchange, but it's not quite there yet. Well, gentlemen, any closing remarks from you guys? What do you think, Mitchell?
I think we have to be careful to not confuse health information exchange as a verb and as a noun, right?
Okay.
Right. We've stated that there are health information exchanges, and those exist in locales. But as both Dell and Life are delivering, we're interconnecting those nouns with verbs, right? We are the plumbing, as Jim said, to connect those pathways of information. And the role that the health information exchange as a noun plays is it helps us aggregate under many different IDs to a master patient index all the information about a single patient, so that information can be shared, including images.
Okay. What about you, Joe? closing remarks.
Yeah, I think to Mitch's point, in sort of building on that, part of the dilemma also is the question of, is it clinician to clinician, or is the patient involved, or who's involved in the sharing process? Because in some conversations with some health exchanges in the past, what I've run across is, if you ask them, are they thinking or planning to implement image, they comment to the effect that well, the physicians or the radiologists have already got a mechanism to do that, and we don't see where it adds any value to the health exchange, so we're not doing it. So I think you have to take into account what the existing infrastructure and what people have already implemented and how that fits into the exchange, and whether there's already infrastructure there to do that. But again, that's the physician to physician. I think where the major opportunity may lie is in when there's a patient involvement. So again, back to Mitch's, or who made the point about the 27, I guess Herman, you made the point about the 27 CDs that one has to cart around. That's clearly a patient involvement, and that may be fostered by the fact that if he's going around to many different specialists, that by granting them access to a website, that it would be much easier to see that information.
Right. Okay. What about you, Jim? Any final remarks?
Sure. And I think the adoption of the cloud is continuing to evolve in healthcare, and I think the use of image exchange in the cloud as well as image archive in the cloud is extremely beneficial to all, because at the end of the day, it's all about access. So if we can get the right people to have access, the classic 3 rights at the right time, at the right place, that's obviously beneficial for patients in the end, and will drive down costs. So it's beneficial to everyone participating in healthcare today. So we see a tremendous value to do that, and I think as Mitch has commented before, the Dell relationship kind of marries together 2 technologies, one for archiving in the cloud and one for collaboration in the cloud, and it's been great to see that start to proliferate across the country so far.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your participation, and hopefully we'll do some more webcasts another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.